Again, it's a rich thing.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how to install and set up Neovim from scratch. Now I'm going to do this on Windows because I think that's what most of you guys are using as your main operating system. But of course we're going to use the Windows subsystem for Linux, so the process is a Linux process. So if you're using Linux or a Linux distribution as your main operating system, of course you can take this process and apply it there as well. So it's not Windows exclusive because we are using Linux after all. Now, before we get into the actual tutorial, I'm going to show you my config. I have a video on my config already, and a lot of people ask me, can you go through the installation steps because it's a little bit more complicated. So this is what I'm going to do today, but first of all, I'm going to show you my Neovim config. Basically, I have Nursery installed, so if I open a directory, this is what it looks like. I can browse through the different directories. I can open the folder with all the recorded video projects. For example, we can go to the camera chat, and I can open up the Python file. Then, of course, I can open up Nursery on the side here. I have this airline down here, the status bar. I can also open with F8 the tag bar. There you go. You can see here with the imports and the variables, depending on the language, we get different things here. You can see that if I begin typing, so import S, for example, I get all sorts of auto completions. So socket, for example. And then, of course, if I use a socket, so if I say s equals socket.socket, then I can see the function signatures. I can say socket dot, and then I get AFINet and so on. So this is actually a solid auto completion that we're doing here, that we're using here. Besides that, I have all sorts of plugins like color schemes, so I can use a bunch of different color schemes here. Let's go with Deep Space, for example. This is another color scheme. And essentially, this is my config. I have surround, I have comment. For example, if I select a couple of lines and then I say GC, it's going to comment them out. Then I can say GCC to uncomment individual lines or to comment individual lines and so on. So this is basically my Neovim config. It's simple, but it's useful. And we're going to go through the installation process now. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go to the Microsoft Store and we want to install the Windows subsystem for Linux. For this, you can choose Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, Debian, and so on. I personally use Ubuntu, but since I already have it installed and I don't want to uninstall it and lose all my configs and all that, I'm going to use Debian for this tutorial. The process is the exact same because Ubuntu is based on Debian, so everything that we're going to do today on Debian is exactly the same on Ubuntu. So you don't have to worry about that. Pick Ubuntu if you want to and follow along with the Debian tutorial here. Doesn't really matter. What we're going to do is we're going to click on install and wait for the installation to finish. Alright, so once the product is installed, we can launch it and this will open up a terminal. It says installing. This may take a few minutes. And once this is done, we can enter a new Unix username. I'm going to go with Neural9 and we can choose a password. We have to repeat the password and then we can already use the Debian system. So that's how you install the Windows subsystem for Linux. If you have some problems with this particular installation, go check out my video on how to install the Windows subsystem for Linux because maybe you have to set some BIOS options. This is not part of the tutorial today. If you want to have a detailed tutorial on setting up the WSL, go check out that video. For this video, we're going to focus on Neovim. So what we're going to do next is we're going to say sudo apt update in order to get all the repositories. We need to enter the password here, and this is going to get all these repositories and whatever, and then we are able to install some packages once this is done. And the package that we're going to install obviously is going to be Neovim, but you're going to see that a lot of the stuff that we want to have in Neovim is going to require additional packages. So what we want to do first is we want to say sudo apt install Neovim. This is the editor itself. We can say yes, then it's going to download it to install it. Alright, so once the installation is finished, you can type nvim to see that Neovim is installed. You can also type nvim and a file name. It doesn't have to be an existing file. It can also be a new file. If it's an existing file, it's going to open the file. If it's a new file, it's going to just create a new file. And as you can see here, we don't have any config, we don't have line numbers, no plugins. We have the default version of Neovim. If we want to change that, if we want to do some configuration, what we want to do is we want to navigate to the home directory. And in here, you want to type ls-la to see if you already have a .config folder. If you don't have one because you're just installing, you just installed the Windows subsystem for Linux, you want to create one. So you want to say mk directory, so make directory .config, like that. You want to change directory to .config, and you want to make another directory in here called nvim, and you want to go into that directory, and here we want to create a file called init.vim, and we're going to do this with Neovim, so init.vim is going to be the file name, and in here you can now start with your config. So you can start by setting numbers. So set number basically means we are enabling line numbers. So the next time I open Neovim, you can see we have line numbers. Then of course I can also set relative number, and now we have relative numbers. So the line numbers are relative to the number that I'm currently at. This is a very basic config. If you want to have my config, if you don't know how to configure Neovim, and I would recommend that you figure out how to configure it on your own, but if you want to have my config, you can basically just go to github.com/neural9, and you can go to the repository called config files. So you go to neural9, you go to repositories, you go to config files, and in here you're having a init.vim file. So here you can just copy my config. I'm going to copy these first lines because they're not plugins, they're just basic Vim configs. So we're going to go into that, and I'm going to set paste as a command. Then I'm going to insert, and I'm going to press Shift, right click on Windows to paste this. On Linux, it's basically just Control Shift and V, I think. And then we have a basic config here. So set mouse basically means that I can use the mouse here as well. Number, relative number, we already talked about that, and those are just some config lines about indentation and tab width and so on. Nothing too special. Now, if we want to have plugins in Neovim, we have to install a tool that allows us to install plugins. And for this, what we do is we go to our favorite browser and we ask Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever you're using about Vimplug. Now, if you are using some other plugin manager, you can do that. But in my tutorial, since this is the one I'm using, I'm going to use Vimplug. So you go to github.com/joomgun/Vimplug, just Google Vimplug, and then you scroll down here to Neovim. Now, if you're using the ordinary Vim, you can also use this command here. We're going to go to Neovim, and under the Unix, Linux section, we have this command here. Now, as a general rule, you should never just go ahead and copy some Linux terminal commands and then just execute them, especially if they're doing something with curl and sh. But in this case, we can trust the source, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy that, and I also understand what it's doing. It's basically just downloading the files and putting them onto my system. So I'm going to execute that command, but you can see here it says curl is not found. This is because in Debian, by default, curl is not installed. So what we have to do is we have to say sudo apt install curl, and this is going to install curl. Shouldn't take too long. It's a very simple tool. And after curl is installed, we're going to repeat the command again. So that is the command. There you go. That is it. So all we need to do now is we need to go to the Init Vim file, and we can start by saying call. Let me just see what the command was exactly, because I always mess this up. So we start with call plug hashtag begin, and we end it with call plug hashtag end. So call plug hashtag begin, and then parentheses, and then call plug hashtag end. And everything in between is going to be plug followed by a link. And this link is going to be the link to the plugin page. So for example, let's start with a very simple plugin, the airline, the Vim airline. We can just go to Google and say Vim airline, and we can go to the GitHub repository. All we need to do here is we need to copy that GitHub link. So Control C, we go back here and we say plug that, and this will install the plugin. This will add the plugin to our Neovim config, so I can run this again. Now, one problem that we have now is you can see that Vim plug requires Git. We don't have Git because we're on Debian. We don't have Git. We say sudo apt install Git. And this is going to install Git. So we run that and we have to wait again for another installation. We're going to have that problem a couple more times today. So we're going to have to install some additional tools, especially for some of the plugins. Most plugins don't need additional tools. They're just working fine, but some of them are going to need language servers. Some of them are going to need Node. Some of them are going to need Haskell or Go. So depending on the plugins that you're installing, you will always have to install additional tools. And because of that, as a general rule of thumb, I recommend Googling a lot while installing new plugins, because with every more complex new plugin that you add, you're going to have error messages. All you need to do is you need to enter them into Google and see how to solve them. Of course, for the plugins that we're going to install in this video, I'm going to provide the solutions. But whenever you encounter some problems, especially when you're dealing with plugins and Linux stuff and terminal stuff and Neovim, you want to Google your way to the solution, because that's how you do it. That's how everyone does it. And asking for help all the time is not going to make you a better programmer. So that is installed now. We can run this again. And now we don't get the error message. Now you can see that nothing has changed, even though I have the statement. In order to actually install the plugin, what we need to do is we need to say :plug install, like that. This is going to open this window on the left here, and you can see that now Vim Airline is installed, and you can see that it's already loaded. So down here we have the Vim Airline. I can reload this again, and you can see it's still working. Now on Windows, you will have the problem that a lot of the icons are not going to be displayable. The first thing you want to do is you want to get a nerd font. So you want to go to font and make sure that you have a nerd font, NF in this case, JetBrains Mono Nerd Font. Again, just Google where to get a nerd font, how to install a nerd font. This is not part of the tutorial. This is just some design stuff. You want to make sure that you install a nerd font on Windows and load it into your terminal. Then you're going to be able to display most of the stuff. However, some of the stuff here is still not going to be able to be displayed, especially if I go now and install Nerdtree, for example. Let's just copy that here. Nerdtree and plug install. This is going to install Nerdtree. Now let's close this. And what was it? Nerd. I think I need to run this again. Do I? Nerdtree. Was it focus? There you go. You can see that some of the stuff is missing. So this symbol here for expanding and closing certain directories is missing. So what I did as a workaround here is I manually set the icons to be something else. So in this case, I had them be plus and a wave. So I can just copy that and enter this down here. Basically, I'm saying Nerdtree, dir arrow expandable is going to be a plus and collapsible is going to be a wave. So I can run this again. And if I now open Nerdtree focus, you can see that I have a plus here, and if I open this, I have a wave. So instead of having to type all the time these commands manually, what I have done in my config is I have key bindings. So I think they're up here. We have Nerdtree, toggle, and focus on these particular keys. I'm going to copy that, as you can do it as well. So you can also go to my config and copy that. And up here, I'm going to just paste that. In this case, this means Control F is going to focus, Control N is going to just call Nerdtree in general, and Control T is going to toggle. So let's run this again. And if I now say Control T, this is going to open up Nerdtree. I'm not going to talk about all the plugins because I did in my tutorial, in my video where I showed you my config. I'm going to talk about the plugins that are a little bit more complex. So most plugins like Surround, Commentary, Airline, they're going to work without any additional hassle. So I'm going to copy most of them. I'm going to copy these 4. They're not going to make any problems here. I'm just going to enter that. I'm going to also skip some plugins because, for example, this one is only for Postgres SQL. It's nothing, or PSQL. Yeah, I think that's Postgres SQL. I'm not going to need that all the time. I actually can remove that from my config. I'm going to get the color schemes. I'm going to get CSS colors, so I'm going to enter that here as well. Then we're going to also get def icons, terminal, and tag bar. Now tag bar, we're going to skip it for now because that is going to make a little bit more problems. So I'm going to copy that. And then I think the last one should also not make any problems. So once we have that, we can run plug install again. And this should install all these plugins. By the way, if you choose to delete a plugin, so if you choose to no longer have a certain plugin, you just delete it from here and then you call plug clean. So plug clean is going to remove all the plugins that are no longer listed here but still part of the system. So when I run this now, we're going to be able to use all these plugins without any additional installation. So for example, if I use GCC, this is going to comment out that line. This is the commenting tool here. I can use surrounding, so I can just go and say YSIW and parentheses. This surrounds the word. Again, we're not going to talk about the individual plugins. If you want to see more Vim content, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'm going to show you my favorite plugins and so on. And I also have the video again on my config already. The important part here now are the other two plugins. So the first one is tag bar. This is basically a tag bar for code navigation. And as far as I know, for the tag bar, we're going to need exuberant C tags. So if I want to install that, I'm going to do that. I'm going to say plug install. And the next time I open that and try to call tag bar toggle, we're going to get the message exuberant C tags not found. Now this is easy to fix. We just say sudo apt install exuberant C tags like that. And this is going to install everything we need. So this is actually still a pretty simple plugin. We don't need to do anything exotic here. Let's see if it works now. There you go. We have the variables, we have the mappings. This is a tag bar plugin here. I can also set the color scheme to jelly beans, which is a color scheme that I'm using here. And to do that by default, I also have that in my config, and I also have the tag bar toggle bound to the F8 key. So I'm going to copy this. What is the middle line? Complete preview, no previews. Yeah, we're going to copy that as well. This isn't too complicated stuff here. No problems with that. So let's run this again. F8 toggles this, Control T toggles nursery. And you can see that we also have these icons now with all these different file types. All right, so that works. The most complicated plugin to install is Conqueror of Completion. This is the auto-completion plugin that works for multiple languages. In order to install that, we are going to have to go through some installations. So this is the plugin here, coc.nvim. We're going to go to our config again and add it at the end here. First of all, this plugin is only available for Neovim. You cannot use it in Vim, you have to use it in Neovim. It's a little bit special, and if we try to install it, you're going to see that we're going to run into some problems when we run the next time, when we run Neovim the next time. So now you can see node is not an executable. Obviously, what we got to do here is we got to say sudo apt install node.js. And I think we're also going to have to install npm, and we're going to have to install, for the individual languages, we're going to install the modules for Conqueror of Completion. So we're not going to install plugins for Vim or for Neovim. We're going to install actually, let me, while I'm talking, just install npm here. We're going to have to install, for the individual languages, the individual modules. So if I want to have completion for Python, I have to install conc-python. If I want to have completion for the C language, I have to install clang. If I want to have completion for Go, I have to install the respective module there, and so on. So depending on which module you choose to install, you're going to have different problems. For example, the C autocompletion needs clang. The Python needs Jedi, a language server, and it needs pip and all that. So I cannot show you the tutorial for all the different modules. Again, it comes down to it all comes down to Googling. If you have some problem, you just Google to the solution. For Python, I will show you the process. For the different languages that you want to support, you will have to find out what you have to do on your own. Basically, just Googling your way through the solution is always the process. All right, now once the node package manager, so npm, is installed, what we're going to do is we're going to open up the file again, and you're going to see an error message that says conc.nvim build index.js not found. Please install dependencies and compile conc.nvim by yarn install. Now, in order to solve that, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to the plugged directory, and we're going to go into conc.nvim. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to run yarn. Now, first of all, we need to install yarn. So what we're going to do is we're going to say sudo npm install -g yarn. And this is not going to take too long. And once we have that, we're going to say yarn install. And this should also not take too long. And what we're going to do after that, it's important that you run it in this directory, by the way. So you need to go to the home directory, config, nvim, plugged, conc.nvim, and then yarn install in here. And we're also going to call yarn build. And then we're actually done with the actual plugin setup. But for the Conqueror of Completion, we're going to also install a couple of modules. Now it's done. Let's run yarn build. And that's actually it. So let's go back and call nvim init vim. And you can see that it's working down here. And basically that should be it for this plugin. Still creating something. Doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and try some auto-completion on a Python file. So let's say nvim test.py, and you're going to see that it doesn't work yet. So if I go ahead and say import and then, I don't know, T, it doesn't say anything. So it doesn't recommend anything. Even if I try to trigger auto-completion, it says pattern not found. So what I'll have to do here, I have to go ahead and say :conc install, so coc install, and then coc-python for Python. Of course, for the different languages, you have different modules. Just Google Conqueror of Completion, Go, Conqueror of Completion, Ruby, and so on. In this case, we're installing the Python module. It's done, and when I now exit and try to open this again, it's going to say something, hopefully. Actually, it found the Python interpreter. Why is that? Why does this work already? It doesn't work, does it? I cannot cause auto-completion. Now, I think we cannot really see the error message right now, which is unusual, but we have to install a Jedi language server. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to say pip, or actually we need to install pip first. So we need to say sudo apt install python3-pip in order to get the Python package manager. And with this package manager, then we're going to install Jedi, and then this should be enough to actually be able to use auto-completion in Neovim. Okay, seems like I was too stupid to click on record again. All I did is basically after the installation of pip, I just ran pip3 install Jedi. So pip3 install Jedi, this install Jedi, and that's basically what I did. Then we can go ahead and open up the test.py file again, and we can try to see if the auto-completion works. Wait for the interpreter to load. There you go, searching interpreter. There you go, and now import T, and you can see it works. So I can go for time. I can say time.sleep, for example, and you can see I have the signature here, the documentation, and that is basically my config. Now you can go ahead and open up Nerdtree. You can open up the tag bar. You have the def icons in here. You can also open up a terminal. So terminal split bash, for example. There you go. Now you have a terminal. And you can build your own IDE like that. You can extend the config. I think we didn't include in this video all the things. So for example, down here I have the auto-completion using tap and all that. But essentially, if you copy my config and you follow the instructions, this is how you build your own IDE. You can extend this with a bunch more plugins. Of course, again, Google your way around all the error messages. I think sometimes you're going to get the error message that the linter is not installed, then just install it. For this you need pip and so on. Google, Google, and Google. That's how you solve the problems, and this is my Neovim config, a very basic one. You can always extend it as I said, but this is how you set up Neovim from scratch on Windows and on Linux. So that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting the like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. If you want to see more Vim content, Vim related content, for example, my favorite plugins or how to set up a certain plugin or me reviewing a certain plugin, if you want to see content like that, let me know in the comment section down below. I actually enjoyed that content, so I would be happy to hear that you guys enjoyed as well. Besides that, also don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, see you in the next video, and bye.